Ken Cockrell Jr.
Thank you very much and good evening. I want to hear you. Thank you very much and good evening. Outstanding. It really is great to see so many of you out here tonight. It's also good to see so many people who are filing in. We really see Ideas for Innovation, which we're kicking off tonight. And this is going to be the first of a series of 6 events and 6 publications, which are actually going to be tied to each of these events. And we really see this as a great opportunity to not only take Detroit Future City as an implementation office, but to reconnect with the public, reconnect with the community, give you an opportunity to not only connect with us and hear a bit more about our work, but also to hear some perspectives from folks who are local leaders as well as leaders from other parts of the state, and in fact, in one case, another part of the country. And that's not to necessarily say that a Cincinnati solution or a Flint solution to a Detroit problem is what's needed, but sometimes it does help to hear fresh perspectives and to mix those perspectives with those of important local leaders. And that's really what this opportunity presents tonight. As we move forward, we're also going to be looking to expand ways in which we can get you to collaborate with us through making this more interactive. But for tonight, I want to thank each and every one of you once again for coming out. And I also want to introduce a couple of special people who really helped to make this event a reality through their participation in working in our convening group and helping to plan the event. And those individuals include Luther Keith from Arise Detroit, Diana Flora with D3, Jessica Williams from MCR, Sandra Stahl, who is with Detroiters Working for Environmental Justice, Renee Wallace with Doers Consulting Alliance, and last but definitely not least, Dan Patera with UDM Mercy and DCDC. And if there's anyone here tonight that feels they should have been on this list but who wasn't acknowledged, credit that to our heads and not our hearts. We love all of you. We appreciate the hard work that you put into in collaborating and working with us to make this event a reality tonight. The last entity that I want to thank, because they're playing a very important role as our media sponsor and partner, not only for tonight's event, but indeed through the entire series, is Michigan Radio. And that is an excellent segue to me introducing our moderator for this evening, Ms. Jen White, who is the host of All Things Considered. Let's give her a round of applause as she comes forward.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I want to first thank you for sacrificing a few of these oh so precious spring hours to be indoors with us. I know winter seemed like it lasted forever, so now that we have some sunshine and some warmth, it can be tempting to be outdoors, but thank you for being here. I want to introduce our keynote speaker this evening, Roxanne Qualls. She was originally elected to Cincinnati City Council in 1991 and served 3 terms as mayor from 1993 to 1999. During her terms in office, she led the city's efforts to redevelop the Central Riverfront and create the new downtown neighborhood that later became known as the Banks. After leaving office because of term limits, she went to Harvard University, where she served as a fellow in the Institute of Politics, a Loeb Fellow in the Graduate School of Design, and a Malcolm Weiner Fellow in Social Policy at the Kennedy School of Government, and in 2002 earned a master's degree in public administration. In 2007, she once again entered public office. She was elected to Cincinnati City Council and served until December 2013. She was also vice mayor from 2009 until 2013. During her 3 terms on council, she focused on initiatives that were fundamental to building a strong Cincinnati, enhancing the quality of life in neighborhoods, building a globally competitive local economy, and responsibly managing limited city resources, which we are very familiar with. Under her leadership, Cincinnati adopted its first comprehensive plan in 30 years and a form-based code. Currently, Roxanne serves as the assistant to the provost for civic affairs at Xavier University in Cincinnati, Ohio. And please join me in welcoming our keynote speaker, Roxanne Qualls.
Jennifer, thank you very much. It is a pleasure being here, I have to say. And as you already heard, all of us who are here this evening are here not to pretend that Cincinnati or Flint or any other city is exactly Detroit, but hopefully to share with you some of the things that we've learned as we have actually faced some of the challenges that Detroit is facing at a larger scale, clearly, but that we made some decisions and did some things which ultimately has made a tremendous difference in terms of where Cincinnati is today. And you'll be hearing from other folks on the panel who will be talking about their experiences. But before I start, I want to give you a little more background because it was a great introduction, but it really focused on the fact that I've had, most recently, a fairly significant political career. But actually, my background before politics was actually in the community, both as a director of 2 major not-for-profits in Cincinnati, and then really for 8 years as a community organizer in neighborhoods in the city, organizing around environmental issues, and was originally elected to council out of that background and to represent environmental issues as well as community issues on the city council. Cincinnati, while different than Detroit, has also shared with Detroit a history of decline. Our population loss, while not the 60% that Detroit experienced, is 40% from the height of our population in 1950. When you also look at numbers such as poverty and median household income, while Detroit is a little larger than ours is significant, where we have a 30% poverty rate, as well as when you look at our median household income and compare it to the national average, it is significantly below average, as is Detroit's. When I was mayor, I every day had to face headlines and oftentimes had to face reporters who would appear outside the doors of meetings that I was holding out of the office and put cameras in my face and microphones in my face and ask me how I felt about the recent announcement that X company was leaving the city and taking with them X hundreds of jobs. And the 1990s was basically the time in the city of Cincinnati where we did see jobs moving out of the city, regular announcements of factories shutting down. Consequence of the population loss was that we had increased abandonment, blight, and vacancy in many of our neighborhoods. And quite frankly, we could not cut a break when it came to the regional media when they talked about the city of Cincinnati and its problems. And if that story sounds familiar to you, particularly if you have been working very, very hard to turn around neighborhoods and turn around the city, and yet you can't get the media to cut a break, that is the case in most instances when it comes to the process of turning around perceptions based upon good work and also based upon just consistent work over time. Because today we're actually seeing some real results of things that we began initiating in the 1990s to meet the problems we were having, and also from the lessons we learned, new initiatives that are having significant impacts in our communities. So we're seeing a very slight population increase, and while it is slight, we'll take anything at this point, quite frankly. We also are seeing, as you are here in Detroit, that suddenly the core city is hot. And the good news is not when the core city is hot, those neighborhoods that are immediately adjacent to it become hot also, that people suddenly become interested. And as a result, we are seeing increasing numbers of neighborhoods that were, quite frankly, written off by many people in the region because of the extensiveness of the blight and also the decline, as people realizing that they're in the midst of turning things around. We're even getting good media, which on a national level, which is a huge turnaround. Many of you may or may not remember that in 2001, Cincinnati experienced what some people refer to as riots, other people refer to as disturbances, and that really was a wake-up call in the community that reinvestment was necessary. And so downtown is thriving. We're seeing ourselves rated as one of the top 10 best cities to start a career, a place that you might want to visit. It's a hip Rust Belt city. We never thought of ourselves as the Rust Belt, but we'll take it. And if I were to actually say what were the 4 elements that were really necessary to begin the turnaround, I would have to say it was vision, it was a plan, it was leadership and engagement of the leadership with the community, because that's what produces the political will to get things done. And also the development of the capacity to get things done. And capacity is just a real simple way of saying money, talent, and organization. So what I want to do in the brief time I have with you is talk about 2 projects that we did in Cincinnati, because I think that they illustrate both some of the lessons that were learned from the 90s on, and then how we're applying those now to our neighborhoods. And the first is a big project, and that was the Cincinnati Central Riverfront. And it's a critical project because I think anybody that you would talk to in the city of Cincinnati would agree that while it has taken over, well, now I could actually say almost 20 years to begin to see the real results as a consequence of what we put into place beginning in the 1990s to create the Central Riverfront, that has both turned around perceptions on a local as well as national level, but it has also given us increased capacity to move on for the redevelopment in other key areas. And so, just really briefly, to understand Cincinnati, you have to understand that Cincinnati developed on a riverfront. And one of the consequences of developing on a riverfront was that our downtown was subject to severe flooding. And that is a view from the 1937 flood. And what became very clear early on, and this is a master plan, as it were, that was developed in 1939, that would actually separate the riverfront from the downtown of Cincinnati and create literally an expressway that would cut the city off from the river in order to ensure that even during a flood, people could get from east to west. And that plan, when it was further refined, included developing a park system as well as possibly locating a stadium. Because during that period, of course, you located major facilities at the riverfront, because who would actually want to look at the river and what value was there in it? You know, because that's what people thought. So they actually constructed the expressway, and that was a major project, and they constructed a stadium. The only problem was, and they began a riverfront park system. The only problem was that what began in 1959 as basically a riverfront covered with parking lots and warehouses because of the flooding, after all the investment in the expressway as well as, and this is forwarding itself, sorry, after all the investment, still remained basically a stadium, an expressway, a lot of parking lots and warehouses. And so we actually had something occur in Cincinnati that occurred in many cities around the country in 1993. Actually, the year I was elected mayor, and in fact 5 days after I was elected mayor in 1993, suddenly both of our teams, the Cincinnati Bengals and the Cincinnati Reds, their owners, basically decided that they wanted exactly what every other team owner in the country was knocking on every politician's door for, and that was new stadiums. Now, this is a lesson in 2 lessons. One is, as a politician, I had learned early on that if you're